Hey, folks, how are you? It's Chef Sarah with the Food Commonwealth, where wellness is the new black. So we're going to do this COVID style. I hope this is going to be clear. Please know I am smiling. I'm so excited to be back with you all. It's December. It's my favorite time of year. And what I want to do today is spend some time doing two of my favorite winter dishes. We're going to do a shrimp and salmon chowder, and then a chicken and shrimp gumbo. We're going to focus mostly on the process of how that happens, right? Because it's really all about the roux. If you screw up the roux in the first 10 minutes for your chowder, and in that first half hour for your gumbo, the whole dish is jacked. So let's talk about a couple of secrets about that roux. Before we get started though, I'm going to take 3 tablespoons of flour and I'm going to pop it into a 350 degree oven. I'll explain more about that later, but it's really important that if you're going to do a gumbo, and if you're going to do it the way I do it, the very first thing you do is get these 3 tablespoons of flour spread out very nicely on some parchment paper or a silk pad and get it into a 350 degree oven for about 25 minutes. Let's get started. First, we're going to start off talking about that sort of classic just white roux, which is 2 tablespoons of flour and 2 tablespoons of fat. We're going to get that started. Our fat today is just going to be a plant-based butter substitute for whatever that's called. Put my corn over here for later. I have a pot. I'm going to get that pot on a medium heat. For this purpose, I'm going to use about 2 tablespoons of flour. Feel free to use a measuring spoon. I've done this enough that I just feel pretty confident that that's about where we are, right? And what I'm going to do is just let that flour toast up a bit. Now, the trick with this is that flour really doesn't have a smell, right? It's just sort of a powdery grain. It doesn't really smell like anything in particular. However, once you add heat to that, just like if you're taking bread and putting it into a toaster, it starts to smell like bread, right? Bread by itself smells like okay, but warm bread sort of has that thing that happens in your belly and your heart simultaneously. So that's what we're going for on this baseline with this chowder. We want to get to a point, sorry, I got to keep adjusting this thing a little bit. We want to get to a point where we can sort of smell like a light toast happening, right? At that point, we're going to get our fat in. I am going to measure our fat. I'm going to grab a tablespoon here because now that burner is really hot. I'm going to pay more attention to it, right? But I'm also going to start talking about what else goes in there. So I like my potatoes to have an extra kind of layer of flavor. So when I'm making a chowder, so when I'm making a chowder, right before I put my fat in, I add in my potatoes and I try and get those potatoes really coated with that flour and then add in my fat. What that does is it gives the potatoes its own little sort of crunchy finish. And then once I add in the broth, it sort of makes that gravy instantly creamy. Or stock, as we call it in the culinary world. My granny called everything gravy. Clear gravy, brown gravy, red gravy, gravy. All right, so my flour. All right, I'm gonna get my potatoes strained off. I have them right here soaking in some water. If you're doing this dish, I suggest cut everything up in advance, it makes it go a lot easier. If you got multiple hands in the house, give everybody a vegetable, right? And let them do their part. Like, ooh, so Tony's on the red peppers, Wayne's on the green peppers. You know, make it fun. Give Julio the onions, right? So some of you also might have picked up a little love package from Room to Bloom or Lotus Bloom Resource Center up in East Oakland. If you did, you also got a little love package from us at the Commonweal, which was some things to do just this. Go home and make a soup or make a stock, right? There were some potatoes and some onions and some carrots. I'm going to use these potatoes, onions, and carrots for my chowder, right? Wash them off. Going to get them chopped up. All of these things were harvested fresh at the farm. Well, not all of them, not the red potatoes. We had to go purchase those, right? But we're just going to get them cut up. And what's most important about this dish is that things are cut evenly, right? Evenly. You want things to cook. You don't want one potato to be really hard and crunchy and then the other potato to be all mushy. Granted, yes, it's a soup technically, so you can get away with that more easily than if it were like home fries or something like that. But still, for consistency's sake, you want to make sure that that's happening. All right, so I'm getting my potatoes all coated with flour. I'm going to continue cutting my stuff and getting it in there, right? I got to get some more celery chopped up. Also, if you got that bag, the little brown bag, it came with a little bundle, right? Wrapped in brown paper, tied in a red string. In there was celery and thyme and rosemary and lemongrass and all of these amazing things, some parsley, some leeks, that's gonna help make this dish really great. Mine is over here drying off, right? I put mine in a cup a couple days ago. Now that it's drying off, I'm gonna add the dry leaves to sea salt and make my own sea salt, right? It's a really great way of getting rid of those like extra herbs without, or if you have a jar at home, you can store them and then you don't have to go buy the Spice Time dollar ones at the store, right? You already have your own. Got to keep an eye on these potatoes. I can smell that, right? I can smell it toasting. Now I have to get my fat in there, right? I'm going to use 1 tablespoon of solid fat like this butter, and then I'm going to use 1 tablespoon of olive oil. You can hear that sizzling almost immediately. Now the goal here is to get the potatoes all golden brown, right? Which would let us know that flour is toasted, right? I'm going to take a couple of ribs of the celery. I'm going to get that rinsed off. While that's happening, I'm going to get the rest of my aromatics chopped up, right? So in this chowder, it's a basic New England style chowder, usually with clams, right? White stock base or clam stock, usually mixed with flour, butter, like a roux. Flour and butter, fat and flour. And then there's some cream added into that, right? And some milk. We're going to leave that milk and cream out. If you do dairy or if you don't and you want a creamier finish, put in a teaspoon or 2 in the bowl on the finish versus saturating 1.5 cups or so into the pot, right? You want to reduce the fat in that. And we can do that by going in here with the basic clam stock. What we want to do now is let's get in some of our onions. I had one really big yellow onion, so I'm going to use half of that for my chowder. I'm going to save the other half for my gumbo, right? I'm also going to get my celery in there. Now, mind you, there's no liquid in this pot. The only thing in this pot at this point is my 3 potatoes, half of an onion, a few stalks of celery, 2 tablespoons of flour, and 2 tablespoons of oil. That's my base, right? Now that I've got that onion in there, it'll start to sweat. Now the thing about fish chowders is because fish in itself is a really quick cook and a very delicate flesh, that goes in probably like 10 to 15 minutes before the chowder is done. All right, so you want those potatoes, onion, that sort of mirepoix, your onion, your celery, your carrot, mixed with that potato and the roux, right? Your 2 tablespoons of flour and your 2 tablespoons of fat to sort of really get in there and create a baseline. Now, we're gonna add some smoked salmon and some salmon to our chowder. We're also gonna put a little bit of smoked trout. Now, the smoked trout came with the skin on it, right? So I took that skin along with all of the tops from the celery, the skin of the onion, the peel from the carrot, and I made myself a fish stock. Right, I'm gonna let these potatoes cook a little bit more. I'm gonna get my colander set up over here. So I like to double strain my stock, right? Because I just put everything in it, all the peels, all the tops, all the stems. I don't want any of that in my actual dish. So I take a mesh strainer on top of a strainer, and then I ladle in the stock so that I just get clear liquid. We want to keep that fire on medium, right? And we sort of really want to let them simmer in that stock so that all of that like natural starch in the potatoes and the sweetness that's in those carrots happens naturally. That's going to give us that sort of creamy, belly warming, delicious finish without the guilt from the fat or the discomfort and bloating from like having too much dairy in your system. Okay, so let's talk about this fish. Just a fillet of salmon. This part over here is a little thin, a little woody. I'm going to cut that right off, right? And then I'm going to add that into my stock pot. Now, I don't particularly want the skin in my chowder, so I'm gonna do my best to take it off here. My brother would have a lot to say about how I'm doing this, but I'm not asking him, so I'm gonna keep it pushing. I just want the flesh of the fish, and I'm gonna use everything else to keep my stock going, right? Because I can always freeze that chicken stock. And again, because this is a chowder and not like a fancy finish that I have to worry about each piece being a perfectly sized thing, I can be a lot more lenient with how that works. So this fish I marinated overnight, so it's a little softer than I would want it. I put some lemon in that marinade because I wanted that chowder not to have to cook so long, and I wanted the fish to kind of do what it does. But just like when you're making ceviche, I might have cooked the fish a little bit too much in the acid. But that's fine. It's a soup, right? It's not going to be sushi or sashimi. We're going to put it in there with some shrimp. It's going to be fine. And it will cook super fast, which will be great. I'm going to get in my corn, which I have right here. I roasted that. And I'm going to get my shrimp in there. Now, what I'm not going to do is stir it yet. It's going to take about 15 minutes before that stock is at a rapid boil, at which point I will add that to the chowder, and that'll cook for an additional 5 minutes for a total of about 20 minutes before it's finished. So I've got a little bit of time on my hands. What I'm going to do now is, you might recall that before we started this chowder, I took some flour and I stuck it in the oven. I'm going to check that flour, give it a quick stir, and then I'm going to tell you what it is that I'm going to do with it. Right, you'll see that is brown. Right, it's that lovely golden brown. It's probably got about 5 more minutes until I can pull it out. It's in there toasting. So let's talk about what's going to be in this gumbo. I looked for a week and a half, and I cannot find local crabs anywhere in Oakland where I normally shop. And because it's COVID, I can't go outside of Oakland looking for some crabs. So this year's 2020 gumbo will not be for a whole group of people. I won't be inviting my friends over to come get a bowl, nor we will be hanging out eating it. So I don't need to make a pot of it for 20. And it doesn't have crab, so I'm a little bit disappointed in that. So we're gonna hang it, and we're gonna do a basic chicken and shrimp gumbo. I've got some chicken andouilles. I've roasted some chicken over here. It's just some dark meat chicken. If you're going to be using chicken, I suggest that you do chicken with skin and bone on it for this dish. Again, just because it adds notes of flavor. If you are if you don't have access to an oven, you can literally just take some of this chicken, coat it in flour a little bit, and brown it in the pan, and then pull it out. For this gumbo, we're going in with a basic bell pepper, green and red. Right, I got my red one already chopped up. Get that chicken in there. Right, now, as I mentioned, a roux is equal parts fat and flour. So it doesn't matter what kind of fat. If you're using bacon or ribs or any of the pork products for your gumbo, get that fat in there first, right? Use that to season your pan. Bacon drippings are great if you're doing that. We're using chicken. And we're going to use a bunch of olive oil. And again, it's just to get some flavor happening. Okay, let's get our toasted flour out of the oven. That is perfect. That rich caramel color smells nutty and delicious, right? That's our baseline for our gumbo. So we're gonna get that in here. And again, you need equal parts. So as long as you're using the same size spoon, right, you're good. Equal parts. So that's my fat. Sorry, that's my flour. That's my fat. Let's let the magic happen. So we've got our onion, our red and green bell pepper, our carrot going in next with our celery. Let's get that stirred up, right? What's in the bottom is our flour and our fat. Just try and keep it all in the pan would be helpful. So I think the beauty about these holiday dishes, these big stew pots, right? Regardless to your culture and what the dish is, whether you're doing a biryani or you're doing a paella, you're doing gumbo, you're coming together to make tamales or pasteles, whatever that sort of cultural thing is, if you're coming together to make roti, it really is challenging in this COVID life to not be able to have those huge family gatherings, right? And we really are encouraging folks to stay safe so we can all get back to like life is what we used to call normal. But we also don't want you to sacrifice your food finishes, right? We want you to be able to still have those great celebration dishes. But first I gotta get it finished. So I've got all my aromatics are in there. Next, I'm gonna go in with my chicken sausage. I'm gonna get that in there. Again, I'm gonna put that shrimp in right at the very last. I'm gonna go back in here with my chicken pieces. Get those in here. Now, gumbo itself means okra in Africa, right? The word for okra, for what we call okra is gumbo. And that's the baseline for this dish. It was really hard to find fresh okra at the last minute, but everywhere sort of had this frozen okra. If you know anything about okra, you know it can be very slimy in the inside. I find that when you freeze it, it actually accentuates the slime, which does not make for the perfect dish in my opinion. So I take that okra and I toast it. I put it, you can see I have a little corn in there. I use the same tray, but I put it on a sheet pan and I just toast it, right? So I get something that resembles more of what fresh okra would have looked like if I had been able to just chop it up. You see the size is different, the color is different, it has a little bit more texture, it doesn't slide out of my hand. We're gonna get that in here, right? And again, somebody's gonna say, are you making gumbo in a skillet? Yeah, I'm making gumbo in a skillet because I'm making gumbo for 4 people, right? I don't need a big stock pot if I'm not making it for dozens of people. Scale down the pot, create more of a celebration finish. I'm setting it up more like a paella so that when it cooks, it'll also look great in the process, right? I'm gonna get some stock in there right now. I'm using the same stock that I used for my chowder. Tomatoes in here next. That's 1 large can. All right, I'm gonna put a lid on that and let that cook for about 15 minutes without touching it at all. All right, let's see what this tastes like. It looks great. It smells great. But I haven't done anything to it. I haven't added any salt or pepper because we had a lot happening in that stock. I know I'm gonna need to finish it with a little bit of salt and pepper, but I want to taste it beforehand so I don't overdo it. Start with the stock. The salmon I know was already seasoned. That shrimp definitely needs a little bit of salt. Again, if you like thicker chowders and you still want to keep it dairy free, you can do a couple of things. You can make a little bit of what I call a slurry, a little bit of cornstarch and water, right? That'll help thicken up that broth. You can add in a little bit of oat milk now. Again, I wait for the finish. It just doesn't have that traditionally in the can very white finish, right? And that's because we didn't add in the dairy. But it tastes great, and when we see it in the bowl, you won't know the difference. Hang with me, be right back. Okay, so we're back. Let's check on our gumbo. We're gonna stir it. We're gonna taste it, and then we're gonna season it, right? I've got those two kind of like Creole seasoning thingies and that filet. Those are a must, right? Can't have gumbo without the gumbo spices. Let's taste it first, right? Great way not to over salt things. Taste it first. Because remember, the chicken is already seasoned. The sausage already seasoned. So and then the carrots, onions, celery, peppers are seasoning. So you don't want to over salt it, right? And you notice that I put a little bit all the way around. It's so that I don't have to go in and stir it. I'm gonna get my shrimp in there. I'm gonna clean this off. And then we're gonna get it plated, right? That's gonna be about, it has to cook. If you're making a big pot of gumbo, yes, it takes 2 to 3 hours for it all to cook because there's so much in the pot. When you're making a pot of gumbo for 4 people, which is really just a large skillet of gumbo, it's pretty much done in about 40 minutes. It's gonna take this shrimp about 15 minutes to cook. So I've got my red peppers, my bell peppers, my celery, my onions, my carrots in there. Then I have my okra in there. I've got my sausage, I've got my chicken, which was already roasted. Then I went in with a can of crushed tomatoes and some garlic. Let that simmer down. Then I came back and added my filet and my gumbo spice. I put in my shrimp. And my last thing is a nice dash of Worcestershire sauce. All right, I'm going to get that lid back on here. All right, and then I'm going to see you at the table. So, it's all about the roux. 2 + 2 = roux. So, our 2 + 2 = 2. So we've got our dark roux here with our gumbo, chicken and shrimp on the finish here. And we've got our salmon and shrimp chowder. We've got our white roux and our dark roux. The blonde roux is somewhere right in the middle. Check out the information. Have a great holiday. Please be safe. Wear your mask, stay inside, stay at home. Love up on those you live with. Make something warm and delicious. Email me at chefsarah@thefoodcommonweal.com. Feel free to DM me at the Food Commonweal at our IG address. That's IG at the Food Commonweal. Stay safe, stay healthy. Happy Kwanzaa, happy Christmas, blessed Ramadan, happy Hanukkah, happy solstice. If I've missed you, I love you. Peace and blessings. I'll see you guys in 2021.